Hey guys, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese, and today we are going to cover something that is pretty widely questioned in the Japanese language actually, and that is going to be the difference between the particles wa and ga. So even well-spoken Japanese speakers will sometimes find themselves confused about which one of these particles to use, wa or ga. And while this video itself won't answer a lot of the questions in relation to these two particles, it will give a basic introduction as to what is the exact difference between these particles. Enough so that new speakers will be able to form basic sentences and know which one of these to use without being too confused about it. So what's wa and what's ga? Well, in the Japanese language, there are separate markers for the topic of the sentence and the subject of a sentence. And this in turn allows for a very unique grammatical construction of sentences. So the general outline for a wa-ga sentence is going to be something along the lines of topic wa, subject ga, then description. So to give a better idea, perhaps the literal way to interpret this is something along the lines of, in the topic of topic, subject is description. And maybe that just confused you even more, so let's kind of just go into the examples. So for our first example sentence, we have the sentenceカリフォルニアは家賃が高いです. So let's break the sentence down. We have California wa. That is California. Wa marks California as the topic of the sentence. Then we have yachin ga. Yachin is rent. And ga is marking yachin as the subject of the sentence. And then we have takai desu, which is high, and that is the description. So altogether we have, in California, the rent is expensive or high. So how do we relate this to the outline that I gave earlier? Topic wa, subject ga, description. So we can see here that California, as denoted by the particle wa, is the topic of the sentence. Yachin, rent, is the subject of the sentence, and expensive or high is the description of the subject. And if we want to interpret this in a different kind of way, you can kind of just think of it as, on the topic of California, the rent is high. Now let's do another example sentence. For our second example sentence, we have George Washington wa seikaku ga subarashii desu. So following the same formula, we can see that George Washington is the topic of the sentence, not the subject of the sentence here, which is kind of weird because in English, if you're going to describe someone, you're going to want to use his name or his being as the subject. As opposed here, the subject is actually seikaku, as denoted by the particle ga. And what is seikaku? It's personality. Then our description is subarashii desu, which is wonderful. So it's kind of weird that we're saying in the topic of George Washington, personality is wonderful. As accustomed English speakers, it feels weird to just say personality is wonderful as opposed to saying George Washington is wonderful or George Washington's personality is wonderful. But here we can see the difference, the very considerable difference between English and Japanese, in that we've already marked George Washington as the topic of the sentence. So when we just say personality, seikaku, it's kind of implicit that that is George Washington's personality that is wonderful, not just the concept of personalities in general. So now let's do one more example, and for this we're gonna use multiple subjects in the sentence but still only have one topic. This will give us a pretty good idea of how unique the construction of Japanese sentences can be. So for our third example sentence, we have 私の学校は先生が親切で食べ物が美味しくてキャンパスがきれいです. Okay, so that was actually 3 subjects in one sentence with one topic, and it's weird, but it does make sense in that all subjects were connected by this topic, which was my school. So if we translate the sentence into English, it's something along the lines of, in regard to my school, or on the topic of my school, the teachers are nice, the food is delicious, and the campus is beautiful. And it makes perfect sense when we put it that way. Just note that here in this sentence we essentially have 3 clauses. The The magic that we're working is the conjugation of adjectives too, in that we're connecting them together as multiple adjectives, as noted by the de particle for the non-adjective, the kute for the e adjective, and the des at the end for the non-adjective. And yeah, that is one healthy sentence. It's a bit more complex than the ones that we've used in previous examples, so you can see how we're getting a better mindset for construction of Japanese sentences. So that is wa and ga, and the idea behind them is very general. There are cases where they're much more complex to distinguish, but yeah, this is the general outline that we can now use to make sense of things. And yeah.